Hi, I'm a massive nerd, and if you're like me, you dipped out of Destiny 2, either permanently or just on a break, to expand your horizons, see what your friends are ranting and raving about, and what's up with this weird little game at the top of the free to play section on Steam. Warframe. It's Destiny with blackjack and hookers, pretty much, casually flexing all the features that Destiny players want and Bungie will probably never implement, all in a free to play package. And if Destiny has taught you anything, it's that lore is where it's at. Problem? Warframe lore is esoteric on a good day, with characters missing memories, being vague for plot or character reasons, and holding back major lore details to make them twists later. That's why I'm going to attempt to condense as much necessary lore explanation into this video as I can in an attempt to give you the information you need to understand what is going on. For this video, I'm assuming you're caught up to 1999. You know who the players are, you've run around Deviri, you've played the Childbirth QuickTime event, etc. But if you did all that, and you're still a little confused, that's what this video is. I'm going to sum up the lore until the events of the modern day and go over some core concepts. Not just answering questions, but helping you come to your own conclusions on some of the things in Warframe left up to interpretation. This will not be the most in-depth primer, and I will be paraphrasing in an attempt to cover the necessary topics but not get too in the weeds if I can help it. Example, I don't need to explain to you why the Corpus are evil. Just play the Fortuna intro quest. Now, in all honesty, there is no way to explain Warframe in a quick, all-encompassing way without being recommended for schizophrenia medication. So I'm not going to. Warframe's story is all over the place, and I mean that endearingly. But I'd just like to drop an example of this game's lore being impenetrable. In Duviri, you can find Kullervo's Hold, a prison island where you talk to the enigmatic warden, fight Kullervo's boss fight to get the ability to craft and use the Kullervo warframe in normal missions. On the surface, this isn't that complicated except for three details. One, the warden has the same voice actor as Ballas, and speaks with the same tone of voice and accent, and talks down to and degrades his prisoner in a way that is very reminiscent of the asshole we all know and despise. Two, the posters on the wall that detail Kullervo's crimes all talk about his slights against the Orokin. This is one of the few references to the origin system in all of Duviri, and the only one not directly referencing the Zeraman or the classroom datapads. And three, Kullervo's crimes claim he wronged the Orokin. But he clearly looks like a creation of Duviri, with the swirling metal and the cloudy energy around him, the swirls of his abilities' particle effects even being reminiscent of Duviri's skybox. So, what is it? Is Kullervo from Duviri or from the Origin System? Well, neither makes sense. If he was from Duviri, it wouldn't make sense for him to have wronged Orokin, and if he was from the Origin System originally, then his art direction makes no sense. And the characters in Duviri don't talk about the arrival of Kullervo like they do the arrivals of Teshin and Entradi. And the Warden makes even less sense, as he was never stated to have arrived, and he isn't in the flesh, but in Duviri porcelain, meaning he was definitely made in Duviri. Could this be Ballas reincarnated after death? I doubt it, as we've never had that brought up before as an aspect of Duviri. We do see this on board the Zeraman with the Holdfast. We do see the ship's crew revived, but they died on the ship, in the void, and still appears partially human. And this does not match the description of the Warden or Ballas' situation whatsoever. I don't think this is supposed to have a solution. Dee likes leaving mysteries like this from time to time. The lack of answers, in my opinion, making the world feel bigger. Maybe Dee will give us an explanation in a future update. They've done that before. But this could just stay an enduring mystery. Now, knowing what kind of a ride we're in for, let's jump back to our earliest point in the Origin System and work forwards from there. Also, I'm not doing Duviri because I'm a coward, and after a certain point, that stops being video game lore and starts being a philosophical quandary on the nature of guilt and the impact of childhood trauma. And if people like this video, I might just do a video where I go elbow deep into Duviri and try and figure out what the fuck is going on there. Also, with the events of the Hex Quest in 1999, as presented, must be taken with a grain of salt. As with the tampering of time travel, it is now its own closed circuit, and events there do not impact the present of Warframe as we currently understand it. With this, we accept some ambiguity, as the story is left vague exactly how deep Albrecht Intrati's meddling goes, and whether he came to take advantage of the beginning of the infestation, or if he in some way caused this. As Kim messages say, that he willingly experimented with the tech rot, but his own records have left vague his deeper intentions, only that he traveled back in time with hands filled with healing. And he took samples back to the future with him. Entrati may or may not have started the outbreak, but either way, he knowingly spread it as far as he could for reasons not yet explained. Our only clue being his offhand reference to Tau, the home of the sentients. How nuking a city in 1999 gets him several light years away in the future year of 40,000 is equally unexplained. Even more so given that the citizens of Tau would probably shoot Entrati on sight because he's dressed like a Pokemon trainer, and enslaving non-humans for blood sport sounds like an Orokin thing. Speaking of the devils, the earliest we can go with amount of concreteness is the Orokin, who at some point left Earth for the moon and built their civilization there. Why they left Earth is conjecture, but nuclear war, the coming of the tech rot, and pollution have all been implied but never confirmed. The Orokin were not the only human civilization in the system, seeing the founding of the Corpus and watching the less advanced Martian peoples from afar, but they were easily the most powerful, having mastered genetic engineering and bioalchemy, achieving immortality through the transfer of an old mind into a young body by a process called continuity, and mastering the arts of cloning, as well as great works of technology and innovation. They would eventually master the void as well after the breakthrough of Albrecht and Trotty, allowing them to travel at high speeds and traverse the solar system with ease. Through Kim messages, we hear that the Orokin made all knowledge of old Earth forbidden. Why or when is not stated. For a number of reasons, time is fluid in this era. The Orokin live forever through the transfer of consciousness and have incredibly fast transportation, so time is meaningless to them. We can sometimes say one event happened before or after another, but if you came here expecting hard dates, you picked the wrong video game, buddy. Now, to quickly clarify, the Orokin Empire was ruled by a high aristocracy of a mortal elite, but the regular citizens were not called Orokin. The title was reserved for the upper crust. And within this ruling class, there were upper and lower nobles, and multiple roles and titles in between. But moving up in the world didn't seem all that common unless you're Albrecht and Trotty, for example, and discover faster than light travel, infinite energy, and several lifetimes worth of night terrors all in one go. How exactly the internal politics of the Orokin functioned is unknown, mostly due to the fact that 99% of them are dead and the living ones are too busy fighting demons or trying to kill us to answer questions. Eventually, the Orokin would set their eyes upon other stars, and two attempts would be made to colonize it. The first, maybe second, it's a little vague, was to send the sentients. Thinking machines which could adapt to any problem and self-replicate, but were built to be horribly burned by the touch of the void, which for the Orokin Empire is like being allergic to water. With builders to construct infrastructure and lighthouses, they would also pull the ripcord on the massive colony ship, the Zeraman 10-0, powered by still experimental technology and packed to the brim with innocent people, because human life meant nothing to the Orokin. And, well, the ship blew up and its burning shards got sucked into hell, and the robots they made to landscape the yard wrote a manifesto and started mailing pipe bombs to Lua. At this time, we do not know much about Tau, and thanks to the Angels of the Zeraman quest and the Holdfast Syndicate, we know a lot about the Zeraman disaster and what happened on the ship. More than I want to go over here, and by now the events that created the Tenno have been one of the more explored parts of Warframe's lore, though it still has its discrepancies, like how the Man in the Wall relates to eternalism and what Wally's true motivations even are. With the Sentients throwing the first stone, the old war has begun. The back and forth leading to the creation of the Warframes and eventually the implementation of the Tenno. Here we find our next big gray area. From multiple sources, we have heard a number of stories of the exploits of the Warframes across the Origin system that take place before the Night of the Naga Drums, before the murdering of the Oricon elite. We hear about Nova fighting pirates, Ash toppling a secret society, Neja empowering small children to murder people. Fun times. And it's clear from these sources that the speaker has fallen for the Oricon's trick. That the Tenno children and the reservoir were not just secrets to the invaders, but everybody. These stories assume the Warframes are acting themselves as the narrators have no knowledge of the Tenno. Then the sacrifice came, and we learned of Umbra, how he had kept a sliver of his mind and was acting independently. And everyone assumed he was special, that this was a personal hell Valis made for him and him alone. And then Jade Shadow was released, and we realized he was just warframing people he didn't like left and right. Now, as we look back on previous stories of warframes, we are forced to wonder if they are independent or if they're being piloted, and for many it's a case-by-case basis. Varuna's Laverian depicts her saving children from continuity, and the narrator assumes it's a maternal instinct, not realizing that it's one used child stepping in to save another. Whilst the story of Dagath depicts her stalking her former lovers like a spirit, the story leaving no room for Tenno to be involved. Granted, Dagath's tale is spun by grandmother and Trotty as a spooky story told around a campfire, and she may have embellished details to make it scarier. I don't believe it would be a complete fiction, though. So keep in mind the next time you hear about Mirage saying goodbye to the Lotus before going out in a blaze of glory, or Naro sacrificing himself to save the people of Mars, is that a Tenno, or is that a tortured soul like Umbra or Stalker? Regardless, after Margulis was put to death for the insult of not wanting her children to commit war crimes, warframes would begin to permeate every part of Oricon society. Hell, it's implied that Margulis was executed by a Tenno, as Jade was made to be the Oricon's headsman, and it was stated by Ballas that for her transgression she would face the Jade Light. As stated earlier, warframes were combating piracy, being given specific places to defend, in addition to fighting in the war against the Tau invaders. Ballas even had Hildren as his personal bodyguard, and didn't shy away from more artisanal designs, giving Protea to Parvos Granum, founder of the then newly formed Corpus. Given how many frames were produced and how interwoven they became with Oricon culture, I'm forced to assume that the Old War stretched a long ass time. The war would go on. Ballas would be the asshole he was always born to be, and betray his race because he was upset that the girlfriend he sentenced to death was dead. This is when Hunhao, Ura, and Natah enter the story. Good old Natah. I'm not going to go into gratuitous detail about her and her transformation into the Lotus because it's low-hanging fruit and it's a web of small remarks across 4 quests, and a large percentage of the information given to us on the topic is provided by characters implied to be under some kind of mind-altering effect or is actually just insane. I'm looking at you, Pazul. She was born Natah. Margulis plugged a thumb drive into a port of unknown location and reprogrammed her to be Margulis for political intrigue and Machiavellian schemes, no other reasons. And then she fucked over both sides at the last minute. I don't want to think any more about how a shapeshifting alien robot's baby fever is the only reason humanity is not extinct in Warframe, or how the power of soft retcons and unreliable narrators made it seem coherent. There are many unanswered questions here, but mostly relating to other characters, like Ura and Ballas's parts in the plot and how exactly they played them. But DE seems to want to close the door on this part of the character, and frankly, so do I. Reluctantly, I can't just zoom right past the preludes to war, because they're supposed to be a little confusing and everything in them is a lie. When Ballas fully cut Hunhao out of the deal and started working with Ura, explicitly is completely open-ended. And what was the point of killing Ura in a flashback if it meant nothing? My interpretation of the preludes is thus. Ura and Ballas were in cahoots the entire time, and Ballas took the Lotus to go play hooky to draw out the Tenno and use her as bait. Why he needed to bait the Tenno? Unclear. But he then began to proceed in tying up a bunch of loose ends, getting ready for the new war and the conquering of Sol. And the only real threat to that plan would run at him slack-jawed and naive, demanding to see their mother. Did he plan on getting shanked by a child space wizard and that old man he tortured for several thousand years? No. But he expertly spun the medical treatment he received as sentient cruelty and threw the Lotus directly under the bus. The preludes are a prime example of Ballas's ability to lie through his teeth and commit to a bit, even making sure the Lotus wasn't in on the con, as she was an unwitting hostage and she couldn't be trusted not to let slip what was happening. What confuses me the most about the preludes to war is the man in the wall's involvement, as Wally leads you to multiple of Ballas's little productions, to Ballas's benefit, leading to the question of if the two were in cahoots. Again, I don't understand what the fuck is even happening here. Because we got a line from the Indifference later during the Hex quest about how all the Orkans sucked and deserved to die. So why would Wally help the most Orokin to ever Orokin to re-Orokin the origin system? But if they weren't working together, did Ballas just have a whole sob story about wanting to die locked and loaded in case there were Tano in the vents? Ballas doesn't strike me as someone who leaves important parts of his plan to chance. My best guess, Wally knew that Ballas would eventually crash out once he got everything he thought he wanted and try and take the origin system with him, killing every thorn in his side simultaneously. But again, that's my personal theory. The slaughtering of the Orokin and the end of that rather large tangent, we lose a big anchor point for our timeline. We once again find ourselves in just a loose cluster of events until Warframe's modern day, based purely on the fact that the Grineer, Corpus, and Ostrons all now speak completely divergent languages that may or may not have existed before the fall. I'd guess that it's been about 1500 years since the fall of the Orokin Empire. Probably longer, given that the Orokin lived forever and therefore built their buildings to last forever, and even those are starting to break down and erode in some places. In this time, the Corpus, previously a small faction beside the Orokin, now hold large swaths of territory, and the Grineer, previously cloned slave labor, had began their independence and started annexing territory aggressively. Cetus became a settlement. The Entrades get infested, Fortuna is built, and eventually we hit the Awakening and Vor's Prize. There are a number of events in the modern day, and in the time between the fall of the Orcan Empire and the modern day, that are kind of unexplained, and I would keep my eye on them, as they might be seeds for where the story's going in the future. For example, Parvos Granum is back from his old man nap, but it's unclear if he's gained full control of the Corpus as a faction, or if he only leads one of many internal factions that vie for power and influence. Other Corpus characters haven't acknowledged a change in leadership, but out of the most recent Corpus storylines, they've been Parvos Granum focused. He's been the main character. He is hungry for resources and territory. The Belly of the Beast event is proof enough of that. So if the Corpus bureaucracy collapses in on itself in the next couple years, don't be surprised. The enigmatic Queens of the Tube Men. We have no idea where they came from, but one is dead and the other is a couple Comey stones short of a board, if you catch my drift. The Elder Queen claimed to be Orokin when she commanded Teshin, but the second she lost her staff, she lost all authority. And with what little we see of her, I can't rule out her lying to Teshin to get her way. Maybe she was an Orokin who got out of Dodge before it was too late, and maybe when they say the Orokin command the Dax, they actually mean the Orokin have the tools that command the Dax, or something of the like. But we have nothing to really confirm or deny her claims. The Worm Queen is still present, making moves without care or remorse, and having no clue what her deal is other than getting real excited at the prospect of watching her own troops die horrible deaths. Narmer does still exist in pockets of resistance, but their storyline feels pretty over and they're probably only still around for gameplay. But they do raise a greater question about the remaining sentience in the Origin system. Sentients lose the ability to reproduce when exposed to the void, among other things like dying in extreme pain. But when the sentients came back to mess with the Orkin, they needed to use the void to get there in a reasonable amount of time. And they made it here in one piece somehow, but there was a consequence, their ability to reproduce. As we understand it, the sentients that came to wage the old war all came in one massive wave, and no more sentients have come. After the multiple thousands of years, the forces of Bazul are likely dwindling to nothing by now. And from the perspective of those who stayed in Tau, the war was a total success. The soldiers they sent on a one-way trip across the universe did their job, because no Orokin have come. Lucky bastards are oblivious to the bullshit I've been ranting and raving about for the last 10 minutes. Bastards are hydrated, flourishing, in their lane. The last crash out was 700 years ago when Sentient Dan's router broke, and he threw it through his neighbor's window. He's in therapy now because he has free healthcare and he works a 4-day work week with 3 months paid vacation. I'm unironically going to be sad when our Tenno inevitably gets dragged there because of the plot because I don't want Dan to lose his 2000-day chip. With that, we approach the end of our timeline, and here feels like a good stopping point. Is this the most in-depth primer? No. But it's kind of not meant to be. Hopefully, I've given you the tools to understand the story going forward and be a part of the conversation around theorizing and talking about what might be happening under the hood of Warframe's greater narrative. I've also made this video because I'm an Astrocross viewer, and I watched him live on stream fighting for his life for a lore video to answer his questions, and I said, fine, I'll do it myself. If you're a lore master who wants to add some detail or call me out in an error, feel free to do so in the comments below. I fully expect to have gotten something wrong. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm just getting started on YouTube and I'm still learning to edit, and if you made it this far, you have my deep, undying appreciation and I owe you a crisp high five.